and welcome. You're watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review. I'm your host Ade Darami, and as ever I have my friend and colleague Mamadou Mboj to go through the stories. Mr. Mboj, welcome to the program as always.
Thank you, Ade.
And I always say this, whether you're a new viewer, old viewer, it's quite short to explain how the story goes. We have 10 stories from the week and we go through them in some detail. 10 news stories that we've covered in the week just past. We go through them in some detail, Mr. Mboj and I, and we discuss them. And so, as ever, let's kick off, shall we? This one has been long awaited. I'm talking about the TRRC report. It has finally been delivered. Have a look.
I thank the witnesses and their families for their fortitude and courageous testimonies. I assure them that my government will ensure that justice is done. But I urge them to be patient and allow the legal process to take its course. That way, justice will prevail and we will be able to heal as a country and move forward united and stronger with greater determination.
Heal as a country, move forward. All the right noises. We heard the President, His Excellency the President there saying, this was when the report was handed over to him. Mr. Mboj, he's making, some might say, a rod for his own back, saying that I am the architect of this and because of that I will deliver on it. But we all know the whole thing was delayed and then there were explanations. But what were your thoughts as you saw it finally being delivered?
Yes, I mean, we've discussed this before. We said I'm not really sure what is the hurry, you know, sort of a couple of false starts, as it were. Right. So we started attributing all sorts of political motives to the delays. But I thought, what was the point? I mean, what leverage? Yeah. What would we get out of delaying? You know, later you're going to receive it and you're going to have to act on that. So it doesn't matter. So that's it. Finally there, of course, we do not know who's going to win the election.
Sure.
That's
That's right.
The incoming whoever
is the president
will be dealing with this.
Has to deal with it.
Within 6 months, your white paper, and then we'll see what happens from there. But very interesting. Reading Reed Brody, he's very confident. The human rights lawyer, formerly of Human Rights Watch and the International Commission of Jurists.
Who's in the country at the moment.
He's in the country at the moment, saying that this is really the beginning, as it were, to sort of getting Jammeh.
Well, that's right, which seems to be, because if you look at what the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Committee looked at, it was essentially Jammeh's rule. It wasn't, they didn't start with Sadada Jawara's tenure. They started with Jammeh's rule. So essentially it is about him and about his regime and how they ruled this country, and of course the human rights violations that allegedly took place. Quite a huge number of witnesses. We've also heard about the number of people who've already received reparations, 671, I believe. And the whole thing comes down to several volumes. You talked about Reed Brody there. But what I found particularly interesting in the press conference afterwards, when obviously they wouldn't divulge too much until it's made public, but what they did divulge was that there are no mentions of that immunity should be given to anyone, and I thought that was quite interesting.
Absolutely, amnesty bit, exactly. I noted that one down. Yes, and apparently nobody applied.
Well, this is it.
I found that one. I'm curious as
because
well.
There are so many people who were quite seriously adversely mentioned, and you would have thought that they might have applied and said, could I be given? But to my surprise, and I suspect to yours, as we heard, nobody applied.
That's it. Particularly those who give testimonies.
Yes.
Really implicating themselves. So the assumption was that perhaps they might have, at least if not overtly, they might have sort of at least implied it. It was implicit somewhat, that maybe, you could be given amnesty and
well,
that
that's
sort of
right.
thing. So
because
even Batambedu, the former Attorney General, he said that he had not promised anybody anything.
Well, this is it.
That was what he said.
And as you said, it was implied there because, what we've seen in other Truth and Reconciliation Commissions around Africa particularly, is that people who came forward were actually, in some cases, it was made implicit that if you came forward and confessed all, you didn't hold back some. If you confessed all, you would be given amnesty. And certainly in South Africa, even though it was raw, it was painful, they believe that that's why it worked. And the same in Rwanda. People who came forward, but the ones who didn't, some of them are still languishing in prison in Rwanda particularly. And so I was surprised, as I said, I know we keep going on about this point, but that nobody applied. And you wonder, is it because they assumed that the Commission would make that recommendation on their own?
They possibly did. So that is why it makes it all the more interesting. It makes it whets the appetite, if you like, for us, to see the report. Whether we're ever going to see all of it, I think that's an entirely different matter.
I mean, history tells us that in the past, the public has been entitled to and has been shown the whole of it. In Sierra Leone and elsewhere, nothing was redacted. What the president got was what the public got. But obviously the president is given time to read it, to digest it. And of course, the way society and the world has gone, should it be redacted or anything held back, believe me, somebody's going to leak the other version, so it's not worth it. And so because of that, I think in due time, the public will get to see the full thing.
Absolutely, and I understand that within 30 days we'll have to submit to the National Assembly.
That's correct.
The UN Secretary General and all the regional
ECOWAS
bodies
as well, yes.
and ECOWAS and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, if they should submit the whole report without redacting anything.
Absolutely.
then we will know. So it will be interesting to see the white paper. Sure. I do not think that all the 427 findings and 218 recommendations. We all know how these things work. Highly unlikely. Yes. It seems that they will implement all of that. Otherwise, perhaps the president would have committed himself to it. What he said is that he is going to study the document carefully, and then justice will prevail. So we've got these things, justice and healing. It seems so easy on the tongue, but the healing will depend on so many other factors. So it will be quite interesting, particularly in this climate of skepticism, given his alliance, the political alliance with the APRC.
Exactly.
So it will be
and I think that was part of why he sort of made the plea, almost saying, let justice take its course. Let the legal course take its course. Don't rush anything. Don't panic. Don't fret. And justice will be done. So we wait and see.
Absolutely.
Wait and see. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And now we're talking about His Excellency the President. And I think I mentioned possibly on last week's program that I was doing a story about the elections, and it was going to be called "And Then There Were Six." It looked at. But now it looks at, and then there are 7, because guess what? Dr. Ismaila Ceesay of the Citizens Alliance won his petition against being disqualified from running. Have a look.
Having regard to the fact that the first applicant only had notice of the rejection of his nomination, contrary to the spirit of Section 47(3) of the Elections Act, which invariably amounts to a denial of his right to deliver a fresh nomination paper and or cure any defect in his nomination form, which is in consonance with all known rules of fairness, equity, electoral justice, as envisaged in Section 42(7) of the Elections Act.
The court's judgment means that the IEC failed to comply with the procedure defined by law in the Election Act, and that the constitutional right of Dr. Ismaila Ceesay, the Citizens Alliance's presidential aspirant, was thereby violated.
There we heard in the High Court, she was quite definite, and Mr. Mboj, we've subsequently heard that the Electoral Commission is intending to appeal the judgment. But I said to a colleague when we were discussing it in the office, I said, it's going to be tough for them. There are certain terms and certain words that Justice Amina Sao Ceesay used there about fairness, about equity, about denial of his human rights. They are going to be made to look like monsters if they appeal and win. But in the meantime, Dr. Ceesay has announced that he's going to campaign from Sunday. on the 28th, he's going to start his campaign in earnest. Quite a shock.
Absolutely, not just with CA and with GMC as well, wasn't it? Two within 24 hours and that sort of thing. So exactly. So what is going on here? I mean, wonderful thing that, we had that recourse to law, and if you feel aggrieved about any decisions, then you could have recourse to law. Sure. And they all sort of showed confidence. They, even asserted it, that, they have confidence in the judiciary, and it's worked how it should work.
Yes, right.
So now the focus has shifted to the IEC, quite rightly so. What went wrong? Did they get legal advice on these things? One would imagine that you have a legal person within the team, as it were, deciding these things.
Yes.
So what went wrong? How can we fix it? But certainly they must have to take a look at themselves in the mirror.
I think so. And I think, again, I was saying to our colleague, I think it was Choi, I was saying to Choi that I think part of the reason why they possibly feel they have to respond and appeal the judgment is because if you go online and you look in the newspapers, there's been quite a lot of criticism of them. And I think they've been stung by that, saying that this is yet another case that they've lost, well, two cases that they've lost in this particular instance. And so they feel almost prodded into a reaction, and perhaps that's not the best thing. But you touched on a point there. If they had taken legal advice before they made the this decision, are they taking legal advice from the same person before they make this appeal?
Absolutely, and it will call into question the whole credibility issue. That is what everybody is saying now. So, but this is it. One assumes that they've taken legal advice and they've got the best legal advice. Sure. And I would like to also think that even the Aton Aegis chambers, I would like to think that they'll have access to that for advice, as it were.
You would imagine
so. What is going on here? I mean, we've been talking about institutional reform everywhere. Yes. We know that for 22 years, most of our public institutions somehow they have just sort of become deformed. Sure. Yes. Let's just admit all of that. Sure. And I once heard Salou Tall, the president of the Gambia Bar Association, saying that within the 1997 Constitution, there are contradictions, ambivalences, and all sorts of things. When listening to the director of communications, is it something like that, of the IEC, said, look, with us, we did everything. We took these decisions in good faith, following law, even though the High Court has decided otherwise. So how much of this ambiguity, ambivalence, contradictory nature of certain provisions within, how much of that has contributed, as it were, to this apparent confusion of what's going on? So it will be interesting. They have to go back and do a post-mortem.
I think so. I think so. And when we looked at it and we looked at everything, the number of signatures, where they have to come from, somebody putting in signatures before somebody else, and then the person coming after have some of those same signatures. As Dr. Cisse said, why should I be disadvantaged just because of a timetable error?
The ordering.
The order. Why should that disadvantage me? If I'd come in front of the other fellow, then the other fellow would have been disqualified, not me. And so there's a lot that they need to look into, and this case has kind of given them and us food for thought.
That's it, and the courts have agreed with him.
Well, that's
Why
right.
should I be?
Well, this is it. So this one, I suspect, will run and run. But thank you for that. And now, we've discussed on here, Mr. Amboja and I, the fact that, as we approach the election, December 4th, in case you've just come back from Mars, there have been lots and lots of forums about peace and we want tranquility and we want there to be order. The latest to join this has been a sort of interfaith forum of Christians and Muslims. Have a look.
If you are not voting, stay at home. Let the children stay at home. If you are voting, vote peacefully. Go home and wait for the results. Peace is significant to a country.
Reverend James Cole, representing the Interchurch and Interfaith of the Gambia Christian Council, urges Gambians to nurture peace during and after the election.
The election will come and it will go, and we will remain here. So when the election comes, they go, we don't want to begin shame and begin look, we put we eye down where we meet, we company. So because of that, in Gambia Christian Council then collaborate and come together for conduct this press briefing for advise everybody and beg everybody within a Gambian within this country, say make we do what we get for do with peace and love and unity, because we all are neighbors.
Yeri man James Cole they talk aku for the one day with Yeri aku. Said yeah, the big one. Listen, yes, of course. For those who understand aku, and we didn't translate in that story, he's begging them. He said we don't want to be embarrassed by the fact that we misbehave and we sort of disturb the peace during this election process. And he was speaking, obviously, a lot of people who are aku speakers here in the Gambia. Semboj, as I said, interfaith, we had lots of interfaith forums and dialogues, but I think this is the first one around this specific election. And of course, the people who belong to these faiths, actually they listen to the people who are the leaders of their various faiths, and so it was good for them to come.
Absolutely, and they've just added their voice, as it were, to really what's been going on, a chorus, as it were. We've had so many what we call stakeholders, holding meetings, conferences, press briefings, whatever, encouraging peaceful elections, and absolutely so. With us in this country, really, we have to say this: we've never really had religious issues.
Sure.
So Muslims and Christians, I don't know, most of us, at least I think from the greater Banjul area who are Muslims, we've got Christian, as it were, cousins or family. That's part
and vice versa.
And vice versa.
Sure.
So one doesn't really expect, as it were, any religious tension, as it were. So it was a good thing, though. Both religions, Islam and Christianity, they've come together to appeal to the adherents. Please, we need to have peaceful elections. So it will depend on us now. How do we behave on the day? The winners and the losers, particularly the losers. This is where you really need to show tolerance and maturity.
Yes, I mean, we had, World Day of Tolerance not that long ago.
Absolutely.
And we were talking about this, especially in the Gambian context, around this sort of thing where tolerance, maturity, and the good grace to accept that, not every time you lose is it because the other person cheated. It's because, the other person scored more than you, whether it's in football or something else or in an election, they scored more votes than you. And so, this is part of the message that was coming across. And
that's the nature of multi-party democracy. I can lose this time, fine. Next time will come. It's 5 years.
Sure.
Whoever wins will promise so much. Would you deliver? Next 5 years, I can come and persuade people to vote for me. So the honest people, if you know what I mean, who are into politics because of the right reasons, then you will have the stamina. Sure. You will have the discipline and wait until next time.
Well, you say that. We have multiple attempters in this particular one with Dabo and Halifa Sallah. Fifth time, I think for both of them, I believe. So that proves the point that, try again. Keep trying.
Let's just go round to our neighbor, just take a look at our neighbor, Senegal, Abdoulaye Wade. Do you know for how long behind Senghor, losing to Senghor, time after time, suddenly he won.
That's right.
So
not only lost to Senghor, lost to Diouf
as well. But afterwards defeated Diouf. So this is the nature of multi-party democracy. It just depends on what the people want. Sure. And then when we have processes and procedures in place, we follow them. In the end, it doesn't matter what. Just earlier on we were talking about how a lot of people express confidence in the judiciary. So let's just follow due process. Sure. So our differences, we can iron them out without resorting to violence.
That is it. And that was the message from the religious leaders. And please, 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 let's all heed that message, whether you belong to a religion or not. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. Now, in Africa, when somebody of significance dies, in some countries they say a big tree has fallen. That is certainly the case in the media world. Whom I'm talking about? Have a look.
According to Professor Abdoulaye Sen, Bandary Mbaye was among the pioneering writers who had undertaken to chronicle former President Jammeh's atrocities. Much of the revelations heard at the TRRC proceedings were first brought to public attention on freedomnewspaper.com. He appeared to have had a network of informants in the corridors of power, but so much of what Jammeh's government tried to conceal then got their first public airing on freedomnewspaper.com. The infamous coinage, junglers, referring to Jammeh's hit squad, possibly gained white currency through the pages of Freedom newspaper. In 2012, he wrote a book titled The Untold Dictator Yahya Jammeh's Story, where he chronicles accounts of alleged murders, tortures and disappearances that had taken place under Jammeh. The then president banned public officials from reading Freedom newspaper.
Mr. Mbodj, we could leave it there. That was you talking about Panderi, but we won't leave it there. Because for people like myself, I lived in England at the time, that was the source from which we got a lot of information, a lot of news. And we were talking about the TRRC earlier. A lot of what came to be revealed as true in the TRRC, even though people had read it in Panderi's newspaper, they didn't quite believe it until they heard it from the mouths of the perpetrators. A huge figure has left us.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, where would we have been without Panderi? I mean, it was just unbelievable.
We cannot exaggerate.
Every day, everybody, we were all, reading,
glued
to Panderi, because we couldn't get news in here. Absolutely. So I called Freedom newspaper in my report the sort of the outpost of the resistance.
Very much so.
Absolutely. And people had to go with him for the sensationalism and all the rest of it. But again, when I interviewed Sidi Cisse, our interview presenter, of Kachadula and State of Affairs, who knew him, they worked together, he said, hey, look, he had this drive, if you like, to be the first to break the news. Yet there was also the other element of investigating. So, in that area, you need to be patient and, how investigative stuff happens. So it seems maybe he was caught in between the two. I want to break it, yet I must investigate. So sometimes you will get it wrong. But really a monumental figure. And then there was something else. I once read back then, there was something written about the family member and stuff, and I responded. And I was really quite nasty to him, I have to say. But I sent him the piece anyway. There was a bit of me thinking that perhaps he wouldn't publish it.
Sure.
He did.
He did.
That was really his style. He will just lay it on the page. You make of it what you will. He just didn't make any moral judgment. Should I do this? What should I do that? And there's something about that style which I like. I had a lot of respect for him. When I was so nasty to him, yet he published it. Extraordinary. So that's a good lesson there.
A very good lesson. And, may his soul rest in peace, but a giant, and one to whom we owe a great deal for revealing. And as you said, he had this network of informers. Jammeh thought he'd cleaned out the palace, as it were, but yet the information kept coming.
Absolutely, but this all tells you a lot of people were just scared. A lot of people around Jammeh working in government didn't really like what was going on. Really, but we were all just scared. So that was one of the ways of getting back at him. So absolutely, he got everything right. I mean, everybody, we were just all astonished. I mean, how come this guy would get things? Sometimes he would predict this will happen, and then it comes to be. I think, it was extraordinary stuff.
And as I said, may his soul rest in peace, and quite ironic that he died in the week when the TRRC report was delivered to the president. And so I think to honor his memory, we really must deliver on whatever the recommendations are. Thank you, Mr. Mbodj. Now on to another subject. If you listen to me at all, either on Drive Time or on TV, I'm always banging on about road traffic problems. But this wasn't my own doing. It's an International Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. Have a look.
If you look at the global statistics, nearly 20 to 50 million people are injured every year, in addition to the 1.3 million people who die.
What I'm saying today is not only psychological knowledge, but observational knowledge. Reckless driving, negligence, carelessness, use of mobiles while driving, drug-related driving, anger.
With the Gambia ranking number 4 in the world's road traffic accidents index, the World Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims 2021 put the spotlight on the reduction of traffic speeds, which have the potential to prevent many deaths and serious injuries for vulnerable road users. If we are serious about addressing such a terrible statistic, The Gambia needs to move beyond commemoration to taking decisive action to address the problem.
We need to move beyond commemoration and into taking decisive action. Some of my friends, in my circle of friends watching this, you know who you are. They're guilty of some of those things, using their mobile phones when they're driving. In fact, it's so routine here. And yet we seem to think it's pure, no pun intended, accident that we are so high up on the global scale because we're so cavalier about it. And I keep asking this, Mr. Mbojan, maybe it's an unfair question. What do we need to do to make people realize that that statistic, a country the size of Gambia, should not be number 4 in the world for road traffic accidents? What do we need for that statistic to embarrass us enough to make a change?
No, tough on crime, tough on absolutely people who transgress, people who breach, as it were, regulations. Here, this is really where we need the law. I mean, we've been talking about this for God knows how long.
So we're almost
really,
fed up.
we're almost fed up. We all remember what earlier this year when Keba Mariana, he said he conducted his own survey.
Right.
In what, 9 months?
That's
806 people brought to the hospital, Edward Francis Small
One
Teaching
hospital.
Absolutely, one hospital.
Quite.
And then out of the 128 died within 9 months.
Yeah.
So the remembrance must go to them. It must be an emergency, but you don't get the sense that it is being treated as an emergency. Yeah. In fact, I think Marina suggested, in his tweet, that this is an epidemic.
Yeah, it is an epidemic, given the size of the country.
Given the size of the country. But you remember, I think there was a time when you published this, when you said it, who was it a member of parliament?
A member of parliament.
Yes.
I could name her.
Yes. But didn't want you to say that.
Yeah, quite.
This is exactly what is wrong.
In fact, said this is written by somebody who has never visited our country, which was rubbish.
Can you imagine that sort of behavior? But this is sometimes what we see with public officials. Yeah, when there is a problem, instead of confronting it, then you want to deny. The first port of call is denying and all of that. So we are not going to solve it. If people in positions of authority are denying it, a bit like the ostrich, I mean, you've got your head in the sand, just because you cannot see anybody, you think that nobody else can see you. The facts can see you.
The facts can see you. And things like, roadworthy vehicles. I remember about 5 or 6 months ago, I was driving to work, and there was a taxi turning, and another taxi was coming, and must have seen him, because it was on a straight road, must have seen him about 100 meters away. But it turned out the one that was coming, his brakes were not working. And so we all watched in horror as he slammed into the other taxi. Both taxis were full of passengers. And it was a shocking moment, because this happened, I'm talking about not even 10 feet from me, because I could see it and I thought, he's going to stop. But he couldn't, because his brakes were not working. Now, the driver knows that car should not be on the road, and that road worthiness of that car was obvious, and should have been obvious to him, and probably was obvious to him, and yet he was driving around with passengers, and luckily nobody died, but it was a horrific moment. I mean, I was shaken by the time I came to work, and that's just one example. I've complained about going home at night. I leave the office at 10 o'clock. I can drive, and I could count 20 vehicles that have one light or none by the time I get home. And that's just on one stretch of road.
Absolutely.
For God's sake. So we're obviously not serious about it. We'll keep doing these commemorations, but we keep doing nothing about it.
Absolutely. And often you find that these vehicles, they will drive past a checkpoint, a police checkpoint, but they will still go on.
And so what are they checking at these checkpoints?
What are they checking at, the checkpoints? I mean, the cynical view, they only mount these checkpoints because there's something they want from drivers and motorists. There is a problem. Somebody somewhere has to take responsibility and say, this is it, enough is enough. Are we going to have, within the judicial system, maybe special courts for road traffic accidents and that sort of thing?
It might come to that.
It might come to that. All these unroadworthy, as it were, vehicles, get them off. The licenses, we all know that there appears to be a kind of parallel.
I mean, people have confessed to me that they took their license without taking any test. They confess to me.
We all know that. It happens all the time. You sit with friends and, you know, you've got your middleman, you know, they even have certain names for them. So all they will tell you, boy, just give me your papers, just give me this kind of money, and I will bring it to you in the evening or in the morning. You see it all the time. I mean, people, public government officials can deny all they want, but we know our experiences. So you're really going to, you're not going to tell me what my experiences are. So whatever you want. So there is a problem, but it appears as if the people in charge have not really caught it on.
Scary stuff, Mr. Mboj. Thank you for that. And I agree with you there. And I think we have to say that it's on all of us, both the officials and us, the ones who are bribing to get licenses, etc., etc. We need to stop. At that point, I think it's good that we take a break. Join us after this break. Don't go away.
With so many things to do in a single day, it's important to have a network you can trust. When there's family and friends to connect with and business calls to make, you need a network that is reliable and fast. Talk longer, browse faster, go farther, and roam wider. When your network is solid, the world is your oyster. QCell, your trusted network in the Gambia.
Welcome back. You're watching QTV and you are watching the Week in Review. I'm Ade Darami and my co-host is Mr. Mohamed Mboj. Mr. Mboj, thank you for your intervention so far.
Cheers.
Now, one of the things that happened recently was International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. It seems as if people being stuck indoors during the time of COVID-19 has exacerbated this problem. What am I talking about? Have a look at this and be horrified.
The menace of gender-based violence has worsened with the advent of the pandemic, as report after report show an alarming rise in cases of domestic and sexual violence. A new report from UN Women, based on data from 13 countries since the pandemic, shows that 2 in 3 women reported that they or a woman they know experienced some form of violence, and only 1 in 10 victims went to the police for help. This country is no exception. The national coordinator of the Network Against Gender-Based Violence, Fallou Sow, gives us a sobering statistic.
We have observed or seen an increase, an upsurge of sexual and gender-based violence cases during the coronavirus. For instance, when we compare 12 months before the pandemic, that is from 2019 to February, from March 2019 to February 2020, we had 45 cases that were reported to the network. But from March 2020, when the pandemic was pronounced here in the Gambia, to February 2021, we have seen a great increase of cases from 45 to 251 cases.
Mr. Mboj, I know the audio is not quite clear on that. So please, can you shock the viewers? It went on from 45 to
251.
251 cases.
Extraordinary.
You know, when you were doing this story, they would have heard your voice there. When you were doing the story, I thought that we might say, oh, it doubled. It's far worse than that. I mean, it was quite shocking. And we talk about this thing about, you know, we always commemorate this, we commemorate that. But this is a societal problem. And it seems it is not being addressed. And COVID-19 just exposed us, surely.
Absolutely. And it's going to be difficult because of the social norms. There was a statistic that I included in the report. There was a report done by the Institute for Human Rights and Development in Africa. 67% of girls between 18 and 19, they said it was okay for their husbands to beat the wife.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
It's shocking.
So it's shocking. So that's really that frontier of, if you like, social consciousness. That's really where one needs to attack.
Sure.
That's really for the long-term solution of it, be it in schools, particularly in schools and the like, because at least that, it will offset whatever one might be getting at home.
At home, yeah.
So this is the key. So extraordinary, generally 1 in 3 women, according to statistics, experience these things. That means that most of us men, we are responsible for that.
The majority of perpetrators are men.
The majority of perpetrators are men. I mean, so we need to realize, all of us need to learn that generally, physically, we are stronger.
Sure.
But I cannot take advantage.
No.
We all have to go through some kind of tutelage.
Because it's interesting, because when this was being, I think one of our colleagues was being frivolous and said, yes, it's violence against women, but how do you know that some of it is not women beating up other women? And I said, well, the statistics are there, that the majority of cases it's men beating up women. It's not women beating up other women. And so, you know, this is something that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely, and legally, beginning with the legal framework, as we know.
A lot of them don't go to the police.
They don't go to the police. Sure. That's it. How is the place the right place to go?
Yeah, quite.
Maybe, you know, we could make certain institutional arrangements, you know, because with these things, people want anonymity.
Well,
they don't want to be embarrassed, you know, the social stigma with certain things. So there are all kinds of factors, social factors, that would make people reluctant to go to the police. Maybe there must be an intermediate, as it were, body, and they will be dealing with the police and that sort of thing. But it's really very, very serious, and it must be addressed.
Serious, must be addressed, and as Mr. Mbowe said earlier, the schools probably really could help, and let's hope that they're doing something about it. Thank you for that. Something completely different. Agriculture plays such a huge role in the life of this country, and yet when you go around, there's a kind of disconnect between, you know, the people who are doing the stuff and the people who are supplying. Some people are trying to do something about that. Have a look.
Access to equipment for commercial farmers and finance to invest in agriculture is a challenge for most farmers. The project seeks to address farmers' challenges by establishing a foundation between the farmers and SME suppliers for agricultural equipment to support the level of production for inclusive commercial partnerships. Babukar Saho, acting CEO of GCCI, says the project is significant for farmers to yield more productivity, investment, sustainable livelihoods, and ensure food security.
There would be an arrangement in place. There would be a matching grant arrangement in place where the farmers would identify the equipment that they need, and this would be verified by a needs assessment by the project. And thereafter, there would be a need for the farmers to do some little contribution, which will be matched by the project. So the process would be guided. In fact, one of the outcomes of today's platform would be that we would expect to come out with some form of memorandum of understanding.
Call me a romantic, Mr. Mbowe, but I was quite excited by this, that somebody's GCCI taking the initiative to come up with something like this, where, you know, there's finance, access to equipment and so on, and bringing together, you know, the people who can supply this with the people who need it. Great initiative.
No, absolutely, a 6-year project, isn't
right.
it? $80 million and stuff. Oh, absolutely, and of course we need some of these kinds of projects. But sometimes one wonders, structurally, have we got it right, as it were, structurally? Are there certain things that we must change to see the maximum benefit of some of these projects? Not really sure, but that would really matter. How many times have we had these projects? They have a finite life, as it were.
This one, 6 years.
6 years. Then what happens afterwards?
That's right.
What do they hope to achieve at the end of the 6 years?
That's right.
How many people helped, and that sort of thing. Sure. Would it be sustainable once you are gone?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, I think they went on to talk about sustainability, that, you know, part of their negotiations with the farmers and the smallholders would be about making it sustainable. And that was why I said, you know, call me romantic, because I was quite excited about that, because every time I hear a project like this, that's the first thing that comes to mind. As you said, you know, 6 years, okay, so after the 6 years, what then? Is it sustainable?
No, absolutely.
Did you make it sustainable?
Yes.
So that it can carry on after the project comes to an end? And that's really what has kind of bedeviled a lot of these projects. They start out with a blaze of glory and then they fizzle out.
Absolutely, and particularly around the financial services element.
Right.
That money, who's going to give it? Because these financial institutions, well, they have to protect themselves as well.
Indeed.
And the rates, the interest rates and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So that was why I was worried about whether structurally one has had it right, because that really matters. In some areas, particularly with us agriculture, come on, what it employs 70% of our workforce,
right.
and when you go to the rural areas, 80% of the workforce.
Indeed.
Have we got it structurally what we need to do to maximize?
Sure.
And given the what it employs in the workforce, yet the contribution to GDP is quite modest.
Small. Yeah.
20%.
Yeah.
So there's a huge space for one to improve. But have we got it structurally so that all these different projects will matter?
Sure.
I'm not really sure.
So GCCI, we hope you're watching. But from me anyway, I think from both of us, it's a thumbs up because the initiative sounds like a really good one. Let's just hope it is sustainable. Now on to something else. Judicial Service Commission has recently added a couple of members. I hear you thinking, so what? Have a look.
We could not have had better membership to the JSC. Both of you come to this august body with tremendous experience in the legal field and in public administration and governance, and with a strong reputation for hard work, honesty, integrity, and professionalism. That's why His Excellency the President deemed it fit to appoint you. And indeed, in the National Assembly, after evaluating your nominations, also confirmed the appointments. So congratulations.
The Judicial Service Commission is an independent organ of the judiciary empowered by the Constitution with an advisory role to appoint judges, recommend the terms and conditions of service of judges, the recruitment of other categories of judicial officers, proposal for the improvement of the administration and efficiency of courts, and the implementation of programs for awareness raising on the administration of justice.
Our colleague Troy there speaking, Mr. Mboj, top of the show we talked about, second story about the independence of the judiciary in the Dr. Ismaila Ceesay case. And we heard their appointment of judges, their advice, their independent body. And we've been seeing more and more of the thing. So on another program, I think last week or the week before, we talked about the fact that they've got this 5-year plan, the judiciary, and they've got all this money to spend over that time. But one of the things is there's been a shortage of judges and magistrates. The commission, Judicial Services Commission, they will be involved in that, recommending, scrutinizing, and saying, okay, this person is fit and proper. A good thing, surely.
Absolutely, and in the improvement of judicial service, as it were, to the public. Of course, everybody's been commending the judiciary. It seems to be one of the few institutions that are making strides, and people can quite
very good high
visibly,
public rating.
Yes, you can tangibly see what's going on there. But this is the key. You've got a man there with experience.
Indeed,
he's been there before, done it before. Lots of experience, not just nationally, but internationally, as it were. So we're seeing these differences, and these two people appointed, Mary Abdoulaye Samba, and Christensen, former the widow of George Christensen, former owner of Radio 1, a lawyer for a very, very long time. In fact, one person describes her as what? Lawyer, farmer, businesswoman, fighter, challenger, champion. That sort of thing.
Multi-talented.
Multi-talented woman. And then Abdoulaye Samba, Suleiman Samba, sorry, that's a former Secretary General of the Civil Service, Minister of Presidential Affairs, also highly experienced in the civil service. And these are the people you want to, appoint.
Yes, people of the right caliber.
Board, people of the right caliber, and then so that we can go in the direction that we want to go.
So good. We're very excited that we hope that they will deliver on this excitement and they will come to fruition, that they make the right appointments and the right judgments, no pun intended. Now on to something else. People who are partially sighted in this country face lots and lots of challenges. Some people are trying to do something about that. Have a look.
Mr. Kweli made us understand that they have issues with regards to Braille printer. And without a Braille printer, they are not going to be able to print the lessons for the kids. So now, how can we synergize the national curriculum with what is being taught in the blind school here? Which means we need to have a Braille printer, but not just a Braille printer. We could have just gone and just get any Braille printer. But this particular Braille printer is able to recognize or speak while you press it. So if you press a button and you want to print, even if you're not sighted, you're able to print. So now you also have two advantages with regards to the Braille printer, which means you can use a Braille paper and you can use the ordinary A4 size paper.
Anybody who's been a regular watcher of this, and if you become a regular watcher of this, you'll know that every now and then I sneak in a story because I want to make a point. This is one such. People who are partially sighted, as I said in the lead up to that, very, very much disadvantaged, very much uncared for. This printer, from what we were told, was the first of its kind to be delivered in the Gambia. And one of the reasons I wanted it shown is because there should be more. And hopefully somebody watching this, organizations, will say, yes, I will buy 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Very, very much needed, Mr. Mboj.
Big time. To be quite honest, people with disability in our societies, in our structure, they've been seriously shortchanged.
Sure.
You know, institutionally, but again, that reflects socially what we are like. Either we pity them, saying that, oh, that's God's will, you know, without really taking them as, you know, human beings. We are all the same. That's God's will. God has decided to do whatever, so we must accept that and take them as human beings. If I truly mean that, then naturally I will consider them in my public decision making, stuff like that. And the other idea I liked about it, the fact that the curriculum in Braille.
Well, that was what I loved about it.
Extraordinary. That's how it should be. Even leisure reading, textbooks, all sorts of things should be we should also have, you know, a Braille version, obviously. So it's high time, really, we begin to take these people seriously. And even the NGOs, civil society organizations, force these things onto the agenda. These things, they matter. What we do as civil society, then you force it onto the political agenda.
This is it. And this is the last time I will say this. My biggest disappointment with the failure of the last constitution, the draft constitution, was the amount of changes in there that were to help people with disabilities in this country. When it failed, I was shocked, I was disgusted, because I thought it was a great chance for Gambia to lead in addressing you know, rights for people with disabilities across a spectrum of things. If you don't believe me, go back and have a look at the draft. And so something like this, highly welcome and long overdue.
Absolutely, at least, I mean, it failed, but at least the framers of the Constitution were thinking along the right direction.
Indeed.
And it will come back. We all know that after this election, the next big battle, if you like, is going to be about the Constitution, who's going to be in it, what's not going to be in it, and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So, absolutely, now we are conscious of it. We're trying to do something about it. The constitutional element is really, that's the easy bit. The implementation, that would take much longer, but at least we'll be on the right track, and the consciousness, as it were, of these things would be raised. So there must be a lot of advocacy work, as it were, and then, you know, we'll see where we go.
We'll see where we go. And so mcjsupport.org is the organization, mentorship and community support organization. You know, thumbs up to them. They're doing a great job, and hopefully they will inspire others. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. And that brings us on to our last story. Short one, this. It seemed as if the football season only ended the other day. But guess what? It's back again already. Have a quick look.
Real de Banjul's coach Baimale Wada sends a message about his team's title ambitions this season.
Well, like I said, we told the boys that we have to put out a marker there for people to know that we are determined and we are going to win this league, come what may, and we have to put a marker. And it was a challenge giving us the champions, and we've set a marker now. So, you know, I'm very happy with it.
The water there. Mr. Mboj was smiling because, you know, again, as I said, all these stories, we discuss them in the office. And I remember saying to somebody, I said, at the beginning of the last season, if you had said that Fortune FC were going to be the champions, I said, you're either a liar or you're a Fortune FC fan. Nobody predicted that. But it seemed to have stung the big boys, the likes of Real de Banjul, the likes of Walidan. And in the off-season, we heard that they were really making moves to come back with a bang, and it seems Real de Banjul have done exactly that.
Absolutely, the multi-talented by Malewada there,
Yes,
now the coach. Absolutely, yeah. So all the euphoria of winning the league last season,
yes,
back to reality, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So would there be another Leicester?
Well, you wonder.
One hopes
you wonder.
You want them to be competitive
absolutely, and disturb the status quo, absolutely, which is what they did by winning. I mean, they played brilliant football to win it. Let's be honest. It wasn't a fluke. They won it totally on merit. But as you said, you know, we know what happened with Leicester. A lot of their players ended up getting poached, likes of N'Golo Kante. He went to Chelsea, and the next season he won the league again. But you know, as I said, Walidan, Real de Banjul, they all have decided that, you know what, okay, these guys have really given us a wake-up call. Let's come back and show them that we mean business.
Yes, but I hope that, you know, because with us we want a more dynamic league. So we hope that you're going to be having sort of, you know, kids on the block to upset that coziness. We don't want to have the sort of league where season in, season
the
out,
usual suspects.
Just the usual suspects there. You want a more dynamic league. That's really what the Gambia Football Federation is really encourage. However you can, you know, distributing resources in a sort of equitable way, wherever they can, and the teams themselves, you know, trying to see how they can involve the community, get us more to be going to the stadium to watch. Now everybody complains that, oh, these people now all they watch is the Premiership and that sort of thing. But well, it's like that the whole world over. But again, the domestic league can move on. You have to do some work.
You have to do something about it. And what they've done brilliantly is that they've put these as a lot of night games. In Sierra Leone, I can tell you, when the English Premier League is on, no games are shown. No games take place, rather. No football matches take place in the Sierra Leonean Premier League, because they know that all the people who should be in the stadium will be in the cinemas watching the English Premier League. And our colleague, Gajaga, went to this match, and he's been to other games since, and he says the standard has been he's been very impressed. He's been very, very sort of kind of blown away with. He said everybody seems to have come back with the determination to play good football. I mean, he's really been excited by what he's seen in just, you know, 3-4 games that he's seen already. So that really bodes well.
Absolutely, and that adaptation there, that's an interesting idea in Sierra Leone. You know, they wouldn't schedule matches to coincide with whatever. Absolutely, you have to be realistic. It's not just enough to say to people, oh, you have to come and support your team, you know, appealing to their moral sense, that sort of thing. No, it must be more practical. We are more pragmatic about things than being driven by these woolly, some might say, woolly ideas.
And part of the pragmatism in this particular game, imagine, you know, Real de Banjul against the champions. The GFF made it free, and so they had a decent crowd. You know, people turned up, and again, that was another good initiative. Obviously, in subsequent games, people are going to have to pay, but you know, let's support our own homegrown football, and particularly if we make these adjustments, because the reality is, you know, if Real Madrid are playing somewhere and it's a Champions League night and you schedule a game, a lot of people who should come to the stadium will stay home and watch Real Madrid, unfortunately. So let's work around the realities of life and not just say, we're going to schedule it anyway. And let's see, because there's a lot of great talent here.
Absolutely, but this is really the key. We have to be innovative.
Sure.
Whatever institution I had, we all know this country, how things are like, lack of resources, lack of capacity, lack of this, lack of that, but it's never enough. If that is the case, then I will hand in my resignation. I'm sorry, I cannot handle it.
Sure.
Then you go and get somebody else. But whoever heads any of these institutions, you have to be innovative, you have to be entrepreneurial.
Sure.
You know, it's that quality of imagination that's going to make the difference. Otherwise, we'll just be sitting here, you know, complaining about, I don't have this, I can't do it, I don't have that, I don't have this, until the cows come home. Nothing's going to happen, huh?
Right, nothing's going to happen. But what we want to see, particularly come the end of the season, whoever wins, fantastic football. Mr. Mbooj, thank you for your intervention throughout the program.
Thank you.
And to the viewers, I always say thank you for watching. And until next week, that's all from us this week. Goodbye.